It's go time.
Welcome, everyone, to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble. Today we have a very special guest, the voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Derek Taylor. Derek, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me back.
The man with the details is now back, and that is awesome.
Yeah, I'm currently in the midst of vacation, laying around a lot and catching up on my games from this past season. So it's a good time to kind of, just put that time together to go, oh, you know what I need to do is I saw this thing about a metric about yards after catch versus expected. Oh, I wonder if I could put that together. Little stuff pops up. You got the time to do it.
I remember when we had our discussion about the details and how many hours you had to put into that and how many times you'd have to review a play, maybe 4, 5, 6 times just to get everything right.
Yeah, it's a process, right? Because you're limited in, well, you know what's happening, but trying to figure out exactly why this broke this way on the play, right? Something like quarterback pressure can just be a peek. It could just be a look. It could be, the quarterback is looking this way and he thinks this guy's about to get beat, even though he's not getting beat. Okay, well, what do I do with that? There's a lot of nebulous stuff in there you gotta deal with to try to figure out. Ultimately, we're all trying to figure out who's the best, right? And so we all kind of put our little spins on it.
It seems like everyone has their own take on, but once you really drill down to get down to the facts, that's when everything seems to start to harmonize.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Except for, well, those facts aren't my facts, and those facts come in context that I have that you don't have that we did. That's the beauty of football, right? Is, you could sit there and you could talk with, someone, a lifer coach, and you go, well, this person is working on the same biases that he or she has kind of built its foundation on, and that might be true, but it also might not be true. There's a lot of valid opinions from corners. Some are more educated, and some are more, instinctual. But there's a lot of value there if you know where to look for it and know how to express it. Versus message boards can be great, but message boards can also be, you smell like manure, right? So it's not always gold, but there is gold to be mined in there.
Definitely. And if you think of any one game that is nuanced, it's football. You've got 24 players out there with 24 different assignments. It can go any one of a myriad of a million ways.
Well, absolutely. And one of the great examples this year for me, and it is every year, Brady Oliveira is a terrific example this year. Like Brady's 5.9 yards per carry, 2,000 from scrimmage, 1,500 yards rushing. How much of that is Brady's credit? How much of that is the offensive line? How much of that is Buck Pierce? How much of that is because Zach Colloras is who he is? How much is it because the passing game is such an enormous threat? How much of that is because the defense got off the field so many times? And we could all pick one that we think is more important than the other that guides our conversation, and then we get into screaming matches about who's what and whom, and it's just the beauty of the game that we all love.
For the Blue Bombers specifically, the last 2 years, this must be hard to hear. The Blue Bombers have lost in the final quarter both years. In 2022, it was a blocked field goal in the final seconds. In 2023, it's a Philpott touchdown with less than 20 seconds to go. This has got to hurt on some level.
Yeah. Was that the most improbable result of that game that you can imagine? Cody Fajardo was the MVP of the Grey Cup, throwing for 3 touchdowns against the Bombers defense? What? The Bombers defense gives up 21 points in the second half? What? That's more than they gave up all year. What? Like all year per game. Well, and Fajardo is going to be an interesting story going forward because he's the MVP of the Grey Cup, but are you 100% comfortable with him as your starting quarterback?
In that second half of that Grey Cup, the Alouettes seemed to find some energy, and there were some massive hits that they laid on Brady Oliveira, for instance, that really seemed to get them going.
Yeah.
To the point where I thought that maybe they were in the ascendancy and the Blue Bombers were maybe starting to tire.
One of the things that I kind of track every single year is how teams win football games, right? And it's just the margin of victory. Do they win it by one score? Do they win it by more than one score? Because I think there's this feeling that one score wins. It's a talent. It's a just it takes skill to win one score games, and we can show that that's not really the case, and that it's really lucky. And you take that back to the Grey Cup, and you go, that was a one score game, a 4-point game. And if any one of those bounces goes a different direction, totally different result, right? Colloras throws to the end zone, and if that ball is 6 inches forward, Kabianento doesn't tip it. Drew Wolotarski catches it for a touchdown. Colloras has Kenny Lawler wide open on a beautiful play design. If he throws that 6 inches further, Kabianento can't make that incredible interception. Lawler touchdown. Bombers probably win that game. Yeah, the final play, if Demario Houston is an inch forward, he tips that ball away from Tyson Philpott. What if 3rd and 5? What if this goes different on 3rd and 5? What if Fajardo only gets 9 yards on that 13-yard scramble? There's just so many along the way that you go, one of those bounces, and it kind of comes down to there's a million points of skill that gets you there, but within that, there's all these little points of luck that you go, if they get the bounces, it's going to go their way. And Montreal got and earned those bounces.
Improbable winners. Let's go back to 2017. Who would have thought that the Toronto Argonauts would defeat the Calgary Stampeders that night?
Perfect example, right? 2 100-yard touchdowns swung that game. I'll never forget it, because I was standing on the field in Ottawa for that game, and I watched DeVere Posey go over top of Tommy Campbell. Tommy Campbell was an absolute force at that boundary corner. To beat him for a 100-yard touchdown, I think it was just before the half. When is that ever going to happen? Come on. And then Kamar Jordan just fighting for extra yards like any player would do in my mind. Pops out, boop, ball's the other way. Toronto's the Grey Cup champion. And people focused on, well, why is Bo forcing the ball in the end zone late? Like, I get it, but the other ones were just so much more important. Just it's the Grey Cup is crazy the last decade, right? 19, Hamilton, 15-3. Oh, they would roll the Bombers. Nope. Here come the Bombers, right? 21 goes to form. 22 does not go to form because, speak of luck, if McLeod Bethel-Thompson doesn't get hurt, do they win that game? I kind of don't think they do, because it looks so different when Chad Kelly was in for that drive. 18 goes pretty much to form. It's pretty gross field, and Calgary overpowers. 17 not to form. 2016 would have been Ottawa's win. Ottawa beating Calgary. Calgary was a superpower. And Ottawa, if Ottawa was 8-9 and won that year, like, the Grey Cup is so wacky. I have to stop thinking that the favorite is almost guaranteed to win the Grey Cup, because it's just been wacky this last run.
This provides another rationale for why we think the CFL is so great. And look at these Grey Cup games and what they produce. Games can be played on paper.
Yeah.
But it's not until you step onto the field and actually play the game that we get the results.
Yeah.
Look at Hamilton in 2014, but for an illegal block, there you are scoring a touchdown and winning that game. You can go back to 1976 and Tony Gabriel's catch against Saskatchewan. You can go to 1972, Ian Sunter's game-winning field goal for Hamilton over Saskatchewan, or 1971.
Yeah.
Leon McQuay slips on the wet turf, fumbles the football, Calgary recovers and preserves the victory. So many examples of how it can come down to the last second.
And this season, just with the Bombers, was so strange. Like 14-4, but I don't know if there was ever the feel of last season. They were one win behind last season, but it just felt, for whatever reason, just the energy I took in from around the team felt, not from the players themselves, but from around the team and fans. It just felt dramatically different. Like, ooh, this isn't the same crew. Well, they're first in offense and first in defense. Yeah, but it doesn't feel the same. And I was right there with them that whole time, right? Like, they're the number one defense by points allowed in the CFL. But if you just cast your mind's eye back, you go, yeah, I remember this defensive back getting beat. And I remember this one getting beat. And I remember this play and that one. And it was always kind of in the air there that they have some problems in coverage, but it hasn't foiled them in too many games. But man, in the Grey Cup, there's Cole Speaker going wide and free, and there he is again. And Philpott just gets in front of Demario Houston. You go, oof, okay, maybe we did see it all season long, and it just didn't rear its ugly head until the Grey Cup. But it's one of those weird things. If you could be the best, you could be number one, but it's one game, and number one doesn't necessarily mean incredible.
Dalton Schoen and Adam Bighill both went into that Grey Cup final limping. Your thoughts on their participation?
Having watched that game, I left it thinking that Schoen did more than anybody replacing him would have. To me, Greg McRae would have been the natural replacement, but they were able to do so much with Nick Dembski. Like, Dembski looked fantastic, right? They were able to do so much with Dembski that McRae could have provided, but since Dembski's doing it, it lessens the need for McRae. So Schoen made some big-time catches in that one. He very clearly wasn't 100%. They seemed to have him working from a set position way more than his usual waggle, right? So I think, to me, that was a great call. I'm still flipping on the Adam Bighill one, because apart from a couple missed tackles, Shane Gauthier was tremendous and laid some big sticks. But I look at that and go, I don't know how you would tell if Adam Bighill, first ballot Hall of Famer, probably a Bombers Ring of Honor guy, if he comes to you and says, "Hey, I can play tonight," how do you tell that guy you can't? No, you can't. We're going with somebody else. And you can talk about skills and limitations and how much the injury affected him, and we can all guess how the injury limited him, and we can talk about analytics or whatever. But just put yourself in maybe the most esteemed head coach going in the CFL right now, Mike O'Shea. How does he tell Adam Bighill, "No, you can't play"? I don't have an answer for that. I just don't know how you could possibly tell a guy who's been that valuable to your team, and then the BC Lions long before that. Like, I don't know what you do in that situation. So you have to let him go and have to believe in him and that he is ready to go. And there were spots where he went, okay, Adam doesn't look like he did before. He said, at the locker room clean out, it was a 4 to 6 week injury. He didn't even bring his equipment to Grey Cup. I'm not sure if everybody knew that Adam did not pack his equipment for that Monday trip to the Grey Cup. The trainer, Brad Foddy, brought his equipment. Bighill didn't think he was going to play. Somehow he was out there on Sunday. Could they do a better job managing an in-game? I don't know. I didn't do snap counts and situational snap counts for that one, but that's such a tough situation in which you kind of have to, I'll say it a lot this offseason, you have to dance with the one that brung you. And Adam Bighill's the one that brung them.
I agree with that sentiment. He's a phenom. And if he says he's good to go, how do you say no to him?
Yeah, you can't. Gauthier looked tremendous. Gauthier's laying sticks on guys. He made the stop at the goal line. Didn't he have a sack as well? It's been a couple of weeks, but a sack as well. Like, Gauthier was fantastic. But yeah, that's one of those ones where I don't know that any one of us on the outside could imagine what would have to happen on the inside. Would they have been better off? Maybe, but I wouldn't say I'm an evaluator of would they have been better off going with a Gauthier and having one of the other guys back up Gauthier at Mike and bring on Winston Rose, because I just don't know.
The Western Final is over. The Blue Bombers are heading back to the locker room, and they are aware that their opponent in the Grey Cup is going to be the Montreal Alouettes. What was their mindset upon learning that?
Well, they all the way through said this is a tough team and a hard-winning team and a team that's really streaking well. I mean, I don't think there'd be any sense that they took Montreal lightly in this one. I absolutely took Montreal lightly. I was on broadcast saying they're going to win by 18-23 because, frankly, they essentially won that previous game 47-3. So why would this be any different, right? And I'm not sure Montreal was significantly different, but I mean, I think they were ready for it. You just are you ready for Cody Fajardo to play out of his mind? For me, Fajardo's always been a real accurate passer. He doesn't have the strongest arm. His scrambling obviously We saw it in the Grey Cup. We've seen it a bunch of times. Is excellent, but he's an accurate passer. Is he the best decision maker? I don't know, but I haven't gone back to his game log, but that might be the best game he's ever played.
You saw him when you broadcast the Roughriders.
Yeah.
At that time, did you think that this guy was a guy on the rise?
Yeah.
Or did you think that maybe he just didn't have enough? I'm not sure how you felt.
He was legitimately the West MOP in 2019. Like, he was, from his first start in Ottawa in week 2, he was fantastic. I think people want to revisionist history that, but Fajardo was fantastic. Like, oh, you're caught second and long, deep in your own end in a must-win game. Bam, Cody and Naaman Roosevelt were good. Cody scrambles. I remember giggling on the air because he converted like a 2nd and 18 or a 2nd and 23 with his legs, and you go, what do you mean? How do you do that? Fajardo is tremendous. Since then, 21 was down. 2019, I think was built on, I hate to go back to the luck thing, but he was the top-rated deep ball passer in my charting in 2019. That is a stat that fluctuates dramatically. I always like to say, here's how I can tell you it fluctuates dramatically. The Strevolution, Chris Strebler, was the top-rated deep ball passer in 2018. And just for ourselves, we'll just go, okay, that stat must fluctuate because I can think of what I think of the guys as a passer. I abandoned him in 21. It wasn't great in 22. I suspect the 2023 numbers in Montreal in your non-Austin Mac targets weren't amazing. He had played 16 games this year and threw 2 more touchdowns and interceptions. His numbers were not in any way indicative to me of 3 touchdowns in the Grey Cup against the number 1 defense. So as one of the biggest Fajardo fans, even I had started to kind of fall off the belief that he'd be able to pull this one off. And man, did he look good. I know there's a lot of hitch and tunnel screens and bubbles and whatever, but when he had to go down the field, like Cole Speaker on Jamal Parker was open enough that Fajardo, though he underthrows it, it's still complete, right? That pass to Tyson Philpott for the game-winning touchdown, point perfect. Right on. This far ahead of the defender, right where Philpott could get it, touchdown, Alouettes win. Like, he and Colloras are both really, in my mind, really accurate and really good in that game.
Zach Colloras himself had a great day, setting a record for completion accuracy.
Oh, completion percentage. Yeah, completion percentage in that game. And, if not for, I still don't think that throw to Lawler was too bad in the back of the end zone. Maybe Zach himself brought up, maybe I should have gone underneath the Dembski because Dembski might have gotten the end zone, Lawler was open, and he doesn't miss him by much, but it's those tiny little margins sometimes.
The only thing that I can point to is that in Grey Cups, he hasn't played that well.
In the playoffs? Colloras' playoff numbers. Doug Brown brought up to me in a broadcast last year. I think it was the Western Final last year, where he said, is Zach a playoff quarterback? Like, is he a November quarterback? And you see a dramatic drop-off when you break it down by month. October, Zach's numbers are through the roof. And in November, competition, part of it is competition gets tougher, weather gets worse, He's more interceptions than touchdowns. You're right. It's not amazing. It falls off, and I think he gets under 8 yards an attempt, which Zach this season was over 10. It's one of those ones that we're going to discuss next season, like Zach Colloras and the Bombers offense in the playoffs.
Zach Colloras has done just about anything a quarterback could do for a franchise. Now, is it sacrilege to even think about or conjecture that he may not be fit enough to be the starting quarterback?
Honest to goodness. So I was at a home improvement store in Steinbach on Monday, and a gentleman recognized me, and he was broken up that I can't believe that Dru Brown is going to get away. Isn't it time to make Dru Brown the starter? And as the governor of Colloras Island, obviously I was critically offended, but I'm like, I get you don't want a young quarterback who looks like he's got great potential to get away. Did Zach look worse this year than last year? For me, absolutely not. People will say he threw more interceptions and fewer touchdowns. Fine, his touchdown rate was off a bit. His interception rate was up a bit. But the interception thing, honestly, I'm excited to get to the end of my charting for the season because I think his interception luck was just worse this year. Last year, he had 56% of his interceptable passes actually being picked off, which is a very low number. And I feel like when I get to the end of the Bombers games this season, I'll see that number be like 75 or 80% of just more passes that were thrown at defenders being intercepted. And he's just riding the other side of luck. Whereas it was all positive last year, this year it felt like it was more negative than before. So, but when you look at that career high in yardage, over 30 touchdowns, over 10 yards an attempt is bonkers. That offense was the highest scoring one in the league. They add Kenny Lawler and they scored, I think it was 4 more points per game on offense. Like for me, there's not even a reason to think about replacing Zach Colloras. And the only thing that would be driving that is, well, it'd be sad to see a quarterback like Dru Brown, who they have developed, get away. That's just growing. I mean, that's just growing up. Your kids have to leave to go to high school. You know, you have to break up with your high school girlfriend because you're going to college, right? That, to me, that's just one of those things that's going to happen. And I hope Dru Brown, if he ends up somewhere competing for a starter job, I hope he friggin' crushes it because that guy's entertaining to watch. There's no way to me that I would contemplate letting Zach Colloras go unless Patrick Mahomes is coming here on a 10-year contract.
Talk to me about offensive coordinator Buck Pierce. Is he ready to be a head coach now?
I wonder. By interviewing for the Saskatchewan job, Buck's ready to make that move upward in the food chain. Whether he's ready to do the move geographically, that's a whole lot of family stuff that I don't know about. So that's between him and his family. There are only 9 head coaching jobs in the CFL. The window, to me, you have to strike when the iron is hot when you're in a business like that. And right now, like, the iron is hot. Like, Buck is the leader of this offense, which is going great guns for years under his command. Yes, he's got Zach Colloras, but the offense is producing with this elite talent. They're producing at an elite level. It's his time to be a head coach, you know, and this is the time you have to go. If the Bombers were all of a sudden pretend the bottom fell out next year, and I don't anyway think this will happen, but if the Bombers were 4-14 next year, is Buck a hot head coaching candidate? Kind of, I don't know. Like, I feel like there'll be someone else. Oh, look at this guy who took over Team X and led them to the top spot in the West Division. That Jordan McSimic will come on the radar next year if BC's good, right?
Scott Milanovich was in the running for the Saskatchewan head coaching job, but it didn't work out, and in part because he was not really enthused about moving to Regina. He has ties to Florida, but do you think now that he's in Hamilton, what does that mean?
I wonder how much is geography in Eastern United States and, you know, Eastern Canada versus Saskatchewan. I mean, I was once, when I was the voice of the Riders, I was asked in an interview, like, what don't you like about Regina? And I'm like, there's really not much. Like, I love living in Regina and la. The only thing, you know what, if I have to pick something to complain about, I said at the time, it's you need to take a flight to get anywhere, right? You had to go Regina to Winnipeg to get somewhere, or Regina to Calgary to get somewhere. And you go, okay, well, yeah, if your family are maintaining a spot in the East Coast or West Coast, whichever one, Regina is going to be slightly more inconvenient than a Hamilton would. For example, Hamilton, drive up the highway for an hour and bam, you're at an airport that gets you to any city in North America. Done. Some of these decisions that we look at and go, I wonder why that decision is made, honestly, probably have a lot to do with geography and making their home life better. Guys, we hear it all the time, right? The Bombers go into a bye week after a game in Hamilton. Extra guys come on the flight because they can go out of Toronto to their houses on the East Coast. Geography and family life are real deals. So I wonder how much of that was a factor in Milanovich not pursuing that job to, you know, full out, because let's not kid ourselves. As much as Regina stinks and the Riders suck, as we would say with Bomberland, that's a pretty great job. At its peak, that's a pretty great job.
Corey Mace now has that job, leading a 16-2 Toronto team.
Strike when the iron's hot, right? Yeah, and Corey Mace that's a good dude. He's such a good dude. Like, yeah, the conversation I've had with Corey Mace, he's curious. He's young. He certainly relates to players. I can see how he would absolutely endear himself to other coaches just with the little that I know about him. That's a good dude. I texted some people in the Riders organization and went, you hired a really good guy. Everybody who coaches probably knows X's and O's at a certain level, and some guys may be savants at it, but at a certain level, X's and O's are X's and O's, and guys know it. But how can you relate to players in 2023 and coming 2024? And if you find a guy that you think might be special in that regard, hold on to him like grim death. To me, whenever I evaluate a team, I look at, okay, how much talent do they have on the field? That's always my first thing. You can talk about great coaches and sure, but I'm like, how much talent do they have on the field? And if you can get that talent and keep that talent in a salary cap sport, you could perhaps get them for a couple bucks less than they might get in a true open market situation. That's going to pay dividends long term.
The Blue Bombers are getting old. They have at least 30 players, 29 years or older. Is this a critical mass issue that is going to come up sooner or later? Could they wait beyond the Grey Cup that they host to deal with this issue at that point?
Okay, I've got an answer for this, but I'm curious. What would you do? Would you blow it up? Would you gently blow it up? Would you ride it out?
That is a tough question.
Okay.
I know I've got an aging offensive line, and I'm trusting that I've got somebody coming up to fill those holes. I'm good with Zach Colloras as my quarterback. I'm hoping I can re-sign Brady Oliveira. Is Adam Bighill getting to the end of his career? If he is, who do I trust? Because he is the captain out there. He runs the ship on the field. And I want to know, before I do anything, can I trust somebody else to take on that role?
My take has been, I'm going to ride her till she bucks you. Just because one of the things that, to me, the Bombers have done so well and has kept them in the Grey Cup for 4 straight years is they are getting superstar level players to take less money than they could get elsewhere. Guys are producing they're giving you more in production than what you're paying for them, which in a salary cap sport is what everybody's chasing. If Willie Jefferson gives you $270,000 worth of value for, let's make up a number, $200,000, you're getting $70,000 in surplus value in this hypothetical from Willie Jefferson. And they're getting that from so many other spots, right? Think how much Brady Oliveira produced over what he made. Dalton Schoen made the league minimum, like the rookies, made a rookie salary and produced at I don't know, 250, 280. What would he cost in the open market? An enormous sums of money. Kenny Lawler took 250 to come to Winnipeg when the top receiver is going at 300 plus. He went at 300 plus the previous year. These guys are out producing. So to me, if you let one of those guys go, are you going to be able to convince someone that your organization and your atmosphere are so tremendous that money is less of a factor? If Adam Bighill's the one I think people kind of point to with the injury, and he's 35, and you go, okay, well, if you let Adam Bighill go, could you get a comparable Adam Bighill replacement for Adam Bighill's salary? I don't know that you can. Like, is Jameer Thurman going to come? Is a playmaker like Javon Santos-Knox, and these are all different types of players, but Javon Santos-Knox is going to come? Are you going to ride the Micah Awe train again if Micah's a free agent? Are you going to the draft? Is Goche your guy who's going to fill that in? I don't know that you can replicate this. You kind of need to get guys into your system, teach them why they love coming to work for you, and hope that outweighs some of the money they might get on the open market. Dietrich Nichols, free agent. Dietrich probably gets paid if he wants to, right? At a high level for an American defensive back. Does he come back for a little less? Does he follow what Kenny Lawler did? Zach probably could have extracted more money in his deal. So if you're me and you think, well, that's the foundation of why this team is great, to me, you just have to ride that out and go, you know what? 2026 might be an awful year. Let's do some building if we can along the way. But 2026, when Willie and Jackson are now in their mid-30s and Jamarcus is in his mid-30s and Biggie's 37 and Zach turns 37 that year, and Stanley Bryant would be would Stanley be 40 that year? I mean, Stanley would be well up there, right? Patty Neufeld will be approaching his 14th, 15th season in the CFL. Like guys are up there. So Jake Thomas, I mean, would be nearing retirement age for sure. Guys that are closer to the end than the beginning. To me, because you're extracting this value that I don't think you can get easily on the open market. To me, I'd probably just ride it out and accept that, you know what, there's going to be an ugly year coming up, and we're going to count on our scouts to help us with that year. And we're going to build some stuff. We have Canadian offensive linemen already on the roster that can fill in when these guys decide to hang it up. But I'm on the rider till she bucks you, just because I think they're so special what they've done right now.
Is there any concern in their thinking that it's 2 years in a row that the team has gone into the fourth quarter, and late in that quarter they have lost 2 consecutive Grey Cups?
In this situation, because I think in this situation, because they're right on the cusp of a title. Like if I was on the cusp of a title in any sport, I would sell out to win that title with an eye on the future. I think of like the Lakers and go, would I have sold out everything I could have a year ago to get LeBron James more help? Well, LeBron's 75. Like LeBron's about to set the all-time minutes record. I kind of want to look ahead to it and maybe keep a 2030 draft pick for the other side of his career. Titles are elusive at best. And to be in the championship game, they've been in the championship game 4 straight years. Just keep going back to the title game, because everybody's in this for rings. I don't know that nobody brags about, hey, we're Grey Cup runners up 2 years in a row. They want rings. And if you've got a formula that's gotten you rings and has the potential to get you rings with a little enhancement, to me, I would absolutely just keep going back to that well, just because change doesn't necessarily mean better.
Is there any sort of discussion about what is going wrong and why are we not finishing those big games?
I wouldn't think so, because they finished in overtime in 2021, right? Like, I don't think there's anything inherently broken in that. They pounded Hamilton into the dirt in 2019, overtime touchdown in 2021, and critical overtime interception in 2021. I don't think this team has a problem finishing games. I think if Mark Leggio's field goal isn't blocked by Robbie Smith, right? If Leggio's field goal goes through, probably not having the conversation of can they close. The other guys get paid too. So I think being there, even if you're a favorite in 2 games, they would have been an underdog, a snippet underdog in 19, and they were probably the favorite in the game in 21. So you lose twice when you're the favorite. There's a lot of luck in there. There's a lot of blocked field goals and luck in there, in my mind.
It's a great problem to have, that you're trying to figure out how to finish games in Grey Cups and win them, where Ottawa is trying to figure out how to win 10 games in a season.
Yep. Yeah. I think everybody would rather be the former than the latter in that one, right? How do we get off the schneid versus, is there something, but I guess the question I have is, what's the systemic thing that's been wrong in the last 2 Grey Cups? And I don't know. Chad Kelly leads a drive late in the game against the Bombers in 22, and Cody Fajardo goes nuts in the second half in 2022, when the first half 17-7 and goal line stands. So is there something systemic in the second half that can we identify, or is it just, hey, the defense got and the offense didn't produce enough in either of those games?
It's a great question. People tend to rationalize. They want to understand. Winnipeg loses the Grey Cup in the final few minutes. Maybe they're not as good. Maybe they're not a dynasty. But for 5 minutes in a couple of games, they could have won 4 straight.
Yeah, like just watching, like Zach Colloras lead the go-ahead touchdown drive with, what was it, 5.5 to go in that Grey Cup game, and they get a stop, and then they don't do much on offense the next time, and then Montreal drives the field for the win. You know, they did a lot of what it requires to win the title, and it just happens it wasn't everything. But we look for patterns, right? We look for patterns in anything, and well, this is a failure, or that's a failure, or I can't believe Richie would send an 8-man blitz on the final play of the game. Like, well, when did he send? It's partly because we're not contemplating every time he sent an 8-man blitz this season and the results of those. It's this one, a guy got beat to the inside and Philpott caught the ball and touchdown, and there wasn't enough time left. Mike O'Shea talked about on the coaches show, like if there was a minute less or there was 40 seconds more, that might be a whole different game, right? Bombers with the ball with a minute to go off a kickoff. Yeah, they might have been able to make the comeback after that Philpott touchdown, but it's just, yeah, I feel like there's things. Okay, well, we know we're not as strong here and here and here. Can we fix that? And if not, how can we do that? How can we fix that with personnel? And if not, how can we make sure in season it doesn't affect us as much?
If Montreal on that third down gamble completes the pass and it goes for a score with Cole Speaker, then the Blue Bombers have time left in the game. How does that change everything? The Bombers have over 40 seconds with which to play.
That's a very good point, right? If that ball's, there's another one. If that ball's thrown a yard ahead and actually leads Speaker and he doesn't have to come back to get it into Jamal Parker, touchdown, you're right. Yeah, there's some more time. Do you like Zach's chances with 40 seconds to go? And Sergio, it would have been a 4-point game. The convert, yeah, Zach's chances with 40 seconds to go. Okay, yeah, it's not great. It's a 20% probability, whatever number you want to pull out, but there's no reason to think he couldn't do that. Schoen, Lawler, Bailey, like Bailey would steamroll some dude. Oliveira on a little drag route across the middle, races for 40 yards, and Dakota Prukop jams it in with zeros on the clock. Right? It's little tiny things. So yeah, there might be patterns. There might be things that were consistent from 22 to 23. Anything went wrong, I think, in 22. Like when you talk to Mike O'Shea, when you hear him on the coaches show, he goes back and looks at everything. How could we have gotten a few more seconds there? Did we use the time effectively? Did we kill off all the clock we could have when we had the lead? Did we save all the clock we didn't have when we were trailing? How could we have done this? What about this? What do we do with 8 seconds left in the game? Could we have gotten more plays? Whatever it is, I feel like they'll examine it. And yeah, this titles are tough to win. I just want to be in that game because if you're, as Montreal showed us, if you're in that game, you got a chance.
What do you think their mood is? I know they were so disappointed by what happened. Going into 2024, do they use that as some sort of motivation? What will be their mantra?
Yeah, I'm gonna. It's the one. I don't love it when they say it to us doing interviews, but we're gonna go 1-0 this week. We're gonna go 1-0 this week. They're so focused on it's just this week that if you try to bring up a future week to them, they kind of don't care. Well, I'm not thinking about BC in week 18 and how that game will decide first place because we have Hamilton here in week 15 or whatever week that was, or we got a reduced Toronto squad here in week 17, right? They just keep talking about going 1-0 this week. So when next season rolls around, like in training camp, we'll hear, man, it sucked not winning the Grey Cup and thinking about that all off season, but that was last year. This year, we just want to go 1-0. 18 times they're going to want to go 1-0. You're going to hear it as fans listening, and they're going to keep saying it. If they bring back last year's roster, there's no reason to think they're not the favorite in the West again. For everything that Winnipeg has to wrangle with in free agency, BC has to wrangle with in free agency, and 2 critical injuries from that Western final that are going to keep guys out in Keon Hatcher and TJ Lee. I've just looked at CFL Achilles injuries. That's 330 days. So we're now talking very late season before those guys get back. And those are 2 massive parts of that team. So BC's got to figure it out if they want a 12-win season again.
Vernon Adams Jr. played the West Final on a sprained MCL.
Yeah. Can Vernon replicate? Vernon was tremendous this season. Can he replicate that? What under the radar and what coach is going to get taken to go somewhere else? Right? They're going to have to deal with this. Well, you guys are 12 wins for consecutive years, West Final for consecutive years. We're one of the other 7 teams. We want what you got. Okay, well, take Toronto. They're one of the other six teams. We want what you got. How much are they going to get poached, and how will they respond to that next season? Will be very interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, the West free agency will tell us, and health will tell us, will Saskatchewan be better? Having Trevor Harris will be great. What's Edmonton going to do with the season if Trey Ford starts as the starter? And then Calgary. Can Calgary really be a 6-win football team? Really? Are they really? Who knows? They lost Mark Mueller to the Riders. So as He was their play caller to start the season. He's now the OC in Saskatchewan. If they come back with the roster that they finish the season with, there's going to be a couple spots to fill. The Bombers are probably the favorite in the West to start the season.
Just an aside, it's still amazing to me that no team that has won 16 games in a regular season has won a Grey Cup.
Isn't that the best? No team the Big Five American sport, like the Big Four North American sports plus the CFL, no team that has the single season winning record won the title that year.
It's just unbelievable. And it also tells you how much of a grind it is to try to get to that record and maintain that level of play. And you look to the East Final and how it looked almost as though the Argonauts were flat. Now, we learned later that Chad Kelly had played with a concussion throughout most of the game, and that impacted his play massively. But notwithstanding, the Argos still looked flat.
They looked awful. 9 turnovers? 9? A couple of them are third down stops. Stuff happens. 4 interceptions? Man. And they're losing their defensive coordinator. So what does Toronto look like next year? I think Toronto's probably, at least offensively, to me, is in a pretty good position because when I looked at their receiving core, I didn't see an overwhelming amount of talent like I would with a Winnipeg or a BC, where I go, okay, a lesser quarterback could survive in that. Davaris Daniels, good receiver. DeMonte Coxie did some good stuff. How many of those guys are top 10 or top 15 in the CFL versus, a BC and Edmonton? Calgary probably has 2 top 10 receivers in the CFL. One of them got hurt and missed the whole season virtually. Toronto, to me, is in a good spot offensively to kind of replicate what they did this year. Defensively will be the question because 1, Corey Mace is gone, and 2, what free agents want to play with Corey Mace. And if that's Jamal Peters, then I'm just going to throw out names of guys who played for Toronto. I don't know what their particular affiliation is with Mace or Toronto, but Jamal Peters or Winton McManus. People are talking about Sean Oakman. Oakman's rotational in that defensive tackle spot. If some of those guys leave, well, what's Toronto going to do with that? Would they be the inverse of a Montreal this season? Great on defense, 3rd on defense, 7th or 8th on offense as far as points scored. If Toronto was 2nd in points scored but 7th on defense because they fell off a cliff without Mace, what does that look like? What's Hamilton big changes? Ottawa can't be this bad 3 years in a row. They just can't. They must have stuff in the works between Sean Burke and Manitoba's finest Bob Dice, because they can't be this bad 3 years in a row.
You point to the Argonauts and you speak to the changes they're going to inevitably face. And this was a team that made 3 East Finals and won a Grey Cup. Winnipeg, on the other hand, has made 4 Grey Cups.
Yep.
And somehow maintained their level of excellence throughout a salary cap era.
I'd said, I'm trying to think of when it was. Was it before 21? But like, if I was on the radio talking about free agency, I'm like, I would make Jackson Jeffcoat the highest paid player on the defensive side of the ball just to get him away from Winnipeg. Because Jeffcoat creates pressure like few other guys in the league. And just to be able to get him, you would have to pay a lot of money to get a guy away to think about leaving Winnipeg. Any reason to think Willie Jefferson is not still a superstar in the league? First team All-Star, team's most outstanding defensive player. Jackson Jeffcoat had his healthiest season. 21, the COVID season, was probably healthy, with the most regular season games played in, I think, 5 seasons. That's pretty good. Biggie, calf injury, will be gone by camp, you would expect. Kyrie Wilson is healthy after missing the first 5 games, I believe it was, with his Achilles. Tell me he didn't look good. Dietrich Nichols is Dietrich Nichols. Brandon Alexander, I think, was maybe affected by that knee at some points this season, but BA's back for a year. So Evan Holm busted onto the scene this year. He's under contract for the coming season. A lot of guys in that back 6 are under contract. What are they going to do with some of these spots? Offensive line, if they were to lose a Canadian offensive lineman, well, Liam Dobson and Tuieli appeared in every game in which they were eligible, right? Those guys got experience. It was the 6th man. It was the 7th offensive lineman. It was only single or double tight end sets, but those guys got experience. The receiving core, come on. If they don't lose Dalton Schoen, I'll be stunned that they've done some stroke of magic. But if you go into the season with Nick Dembski and Kenny Lawler, and if Rasheed Bailey comes back, and Drew Wolatarski, and you plop in another American, you're easily in the top half of the league as far as receiving cores go. And we'll see what else results. If Brady's back, Brady had an amazing season this year. That run game and the offense was fantastic. They got that in their bag as well for next year. And like I said, Zach to me is the best quarterback in the CFL. So yeah, they're set in a lot of great spots.
Where are you in this transition period that we're in? Are you looking back at what happened during the regular season and how it finished? Are you looking forward to 2024, given that the Blue Bombers likely will be a very strong team again?
I'm still looking back, just kind of catching up and looking at, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or was this the thing I thought it was? Because over the course of, like, Doug Brown and I called 21 games this year, 2 preseason, 18 in the regular season, and then 1 in the playoffs. And by the end, you've got your narratives from the season of, okay, well, this was a thing we saw all year long. This was a thing that popped up at midseason. And just to kind of go back and go, oh, was that actually what it was? Was that actually the truth of it? So when we start the season in 24, I'll have an accurate picture of what 2023 was. Was Brady amazing in every game, or were there some down ones? Okay, well, let's examine that. Was Zach's season actually better than last year, or was it worse than 2022? Well, let's look at that and just kind of figure out what the truth was about 2023, because 21 games, they all kind of blend together, right? Like, oh, I remember this great thing that happened against Ottawa. Oh, that was against Toronto. Right. Because it just 160 plays in 21 games. You're like, oh, remember when we were on the Tyrell Pigram bandwagon, Piggy T? And I was cajoling Wade Miller to make a sandwich for Piggy T with the help of the Manitoba pork producers. No, that didn't go anywhere because he got stopped on first and goal and second and goal. And that was about the end of that, or second and third and goal. So for me, it's kind of looking back and seeing what was the truth of 2023 and then using that to kind of inform what we do in 2024.
Derek, thank you so much for being on the show. This was fantastic to have this chance to talk to you again. Where can people find you on the socials?
I am on Twitter, and I'll just keep calling it Twitter forever because calling it X sounds idiotic. At DT on OB. I'm not on Instagram as much as my wife wants me to be, but that's DT on CJOB. And then I'll pop up throughout the off season. Around free agent time, I'll do some writing on the Winnipeg Global CJOB news site in advance. Man, I love free agency. Moving this guy to here and moving that guy to there, and hypothesizing who would look great where, and can the Bombers get Money Hunter in at corner for next season and stuff like that. DT on OB on Twitter is the main place to go.
Have a very happy holiday season.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at Third Down Gamble. Join us again, the Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources provided by Canadian Football League player and game statistics for analytics, game notes, and statistics, and 3downnation.com for news, insight, and in-depth analysis. Please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com for the most up-to-date information on the Canadian Football League.